How often do you see an incredible paint job and just wish that there was one simple way for you to be able to instantly up the level of your painting? Maybe not to the level of that paint job, but just significantly. Maybe you've got a special character or a special miniature and you'd like to be able to get there as fast as possible. In today's video, I'm going to be trying to do that. I am the guinea pig and we're going to be conducting a little bit of an experiment. Like with any experiment, it's important to define our variables. So I'm going to be using pretty much the paints, techniques and methods from our last video, which was speed painting skeletons, and I'm going to be applying it to, albeit a slightly more complex and much more modern model, about 3 decades more modern. I'm going to be painting a Terminator, but same paints, same methods, roughly the same brushes, pretty much the same sequence. So what possibly could I be adding? What magic sauce is going to make it so I can achieve what I would regard as like a fancy paint job, a display paint job, using the same methods? Well, it's very, very simple actually. I'm going to go slower and I'm going to be careful. And that's it. Let's jump in. All right, so priming wise, we've gone pretty simple. It's just Word Bearer's Red, which is a classic of mine. Also, you might recognize it from our Bloodthirster. There's the slap chop base we use there. So what we're going to do now is going to spray this guy and I'm going to be aiming at 45 degrees from his front, especially with the spraying. And the back's going to be a bit darker because I want to be lazy, but from the front, we're going to be kind of trying to copy a light, hitting it from this angle. So primarily I'll be spraying from that angle and a lot of dusting from above. Okay, so here we have our Zenithal. What you can see is that angle. The base of my brush is the angle. We've sprayed at the mini from here. We sprayed it kind of lightly from above. And I've done that whilst turning it around. So roughly, we've got the impression he's lit from the top. If we look at it from below, darker. Look at it from above, much lighter. So step number 1, we've got to counter the slightly fluffy white spray that we've used, and we're doing a 2-step contrast process in this minimum. So what we're going to do is make a soft mix of an already soft contrast. We're using Skeleton Horde. Going to be using a size 2 or a size 3 for this, something that's not too small but not too big. So that is a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm going to be using this contrast quite thin and it's already soft. Let me show you it. And I'll show you on one part of it. I'll do the rest off camera because I'm going to be keeping this at the same orientation. So if we take his power fist, I'm going to go top to bottom. We'll make sure we cover the entire thing. This is why we work in sections. And we're going to be pulling our strokes downwards and soaking up any extra. If I were to tip this around now, it would already start ruining things. One thing we can do is anywhere we get excess, you can pull it off as long as we're fast. You can only really do that if you're quick. The sprayed white base is actually dry quite fast, so you've got to be quite speedy. All right, we'll do that all over. When I say all over, I do literally mean all over, by the way. You can maybe try and avoid the gun and stuff, but there's no real benefit to it. And remember that your corners and your edges, you got to go over them too. So often I'll start on the edges and then work my way onto the main piece just to make sure I didn't miss them. So easy to miss bits, especially on white. It's not very forgiving. Okay, so we actually look surprisingly good already, really. A couple of little of internal kind of drifts from the contrast, but overall pretty good. We only did one thin coat. I let it go too thick here. It's always a problematic point on Terminators, but what we're going to do now is polish this. So, brush selection. I'm going to be using D pluses, probably medium and small for this. And I'm going to be using the small, especially when I need to do a smaller stipple. Okay, so we're going to be using Screaming Skull, which should be a pretty close color to this. Slightly lighter, but not loads lighter. And that soft rather than aggressive step up is what's hopefully going to lend a little bit of kind of finesse to our paint job. Okay, we have our 100% dry model. That's very important. Let's go. A little bit more moisture in there. Okay, so I'm going to use the medium. We're not just going yellow all over, although we can go kind of lightly and then do that with a white afterwards as far as being specific goes. But what we're going to do is start off, and hopefully this color looks kind of bright. I took a picture, but we know where we sprayed it from. We're going to start stippling the areas that we would like to bring up to be where our light was reflecting when we took that picture. So the same angle that we sent our spray from, that's the same angle that we're painting it from. Anywhere there was a particularly light part, point, the gauntlet was one. Here was one. We're just going to stipple it up. Really simple, no need to overcomplicate it. Our paint is slightly dilute. Things are not super strong. I've chosen colours that are close together. It's going to make it more forgiving. Don't overthink it. Anywhere where we had it lighter on the photo, you're going to stipple a little circle. If the medium is too big, I will drop to the small plus. And if that was too small, too big, I could drop to a small and go all over the model, doing those stipples first. Generally speaking, you're not going to be stippling anywhere where it's pulled and it's really dark. There will be only a very few sections, probably on smaller parts of the model, like this back bit there. Okay, so we're doing pretty well. I actually haven't needed to go to the smaller brush yet. What we're going to do now, I'm sure you're wondering what we're doing about the edges, is we're going to take care of those with the same brush. We're just going to be doing traditional dry brushing rather than stippling. So see, I'm carefully removing on my palette here. Now, start stippling so you can get an idea of what's going on with your brush. When you're confident with the brush, go to an edge you definitely want highlighting. Spend a little bit of time there. Then once you feel super confident, if you want, you can do circles. Now, this is going to slowly and carefully kind of blend your stippling with the rest of your model. But most importantly, perhaps it's going to take care of those edges. You're not looking to make a massive difference with this. But what this will do as well is any areas where you've got smudges or mistakes, like I had on the shin or I've got on his crotch bit, you can dry brush those. It's all about making sure you've not got too much excess, but what's there is ready to leave. This should not take long at all. If you want to specifically hit some edges, even if it's unrealistic for them to be reflecting light or anything like that, go for it. You could even get out your normal brush at this point and edge highlight if you wished. If it turns out you've missed any bits, like these fingers, you can always just put a little bit more on and give them what I would call a heavy overbrush. So, especially on a downwards facing bit, it's not particularly a worry, but it kind of sorts them out. Really firm grip on your mini for this. Pretty much done. Make sure you shake, it's important. So what could possibly next after that step? So what we're going to do is we're getting out ivory, which is a much brighter bone color from Vallejo model color. You can add a little bit of white to your previous color if you wanted, whatever you prefer. Ivory's perfect though for my bit. What we're going to do is we're going to make a little bit of a mix. Could do this with a dry brush, but there we go. You can just drag one into the other with a dry brush. I'll do that now actually. Either way is fine. At this point, you have the option to dry brush, you have the option to stipple, you could skip this, you could just edge highlight. It's all about catering it to your needs and specifications, which they might be to do with skill. People often say it's to do with skill, but really I think it's to do with how much time you're willing to spend on the model. If you've got 20 of these, then maybe you want to skip a step or speed it up or something like that. Just make it suitable for whatever time frame you've got in mind. Put these two together. The ivory is a lot stronger than the GW color. So for it to look 50-50, you'll probably need like a 1:2 or maybe even a 1:3 ratio. And you'll have to be careful with your dilution in terms of bringing water into the equation too. We're going to stipple in the middle of any section or the front of any section, the brightest bit of any section that we stippled with in the previous step. Remember, you can always make it lighter afterwards in another step. Okay, we're cool. Just go steady. Pay attention to whether the paint is actually leaving your brush nicely, and you don't have to go back for more paint. You can always go back for more water to help the paint that's on there leave, like I just did there. Okay, I've removed excess. Then you can go around and do your edges just as we were. You don't want it creeping further than it needs to, so you're just going for the very edges with this. Small plus. The reason we drop down a brush is because we want a smaller circumference on the circle. Diameter, I guess, is more relevant. There we go, so that shoulder pad is kind of finished. What we can do though, is if you want to manually highlight, we can. So again, fully optional. If you want to pop an edge down, guess which body part fixed that? We've all done it, don't pretend. So what we had there, before I started trying to edge highlight and couldn't multitask, was our dry brushes taking us with a soft edge highlight, and then we've put down a hard edge highlight, which actually looks really, really good. Now, if you want to put a brave highlight in the middle of any of your stipple sections, you can put something manual down, you could dilute your paint a bit more, you could glaze it, you could go in with a smaller D and pure ivory, completely up to you, and it's a fully scalable technique. Okay, so we can see that I spent some time with the shoulder pad and the gauntlet. You can stipple it, you can glaze it, whatever you like. You're just kind of following the tone that you've set originally. I went a little bit rougher here, and I don't think it's that noticeable with the stippling. Just jumped up straight to nearly an ivory. And obviously you could go to white if you wanted. I think I'm going to skip that option for now though. What I'm going to do is put a very, very thin version of our contrast down. White is very unforgiving, or light ivory, whatever you want to put it. So I'm really taking no chances with contamination in terms of like little bits or something like that in my painting area. He says that. Watch a great big splodge appear. Contamination in my paint pots though, fine. You guys know that though. Okay, very, very soft mix. I'm actually going to go for 2 contrast medium to 1 skeleton hoard. We're going to be extremely careful with this. We're taking it down to where we want it darkest, away from where it's lightest, and we're ready to work fast. Can deposit more if we wish, and if we work super quick with a licked brush, of course, we should be able to push it away from our highlight areas. I think I actually want it a bit thinner than that. Do I have time to fix it or not? Mistakes happen, guys. I think what's happened here is, even though I'm very used to doing this type of thing and using that type of ratio, the light colours, you just need to go so much softer. So yeah, I can push it off. I think actually I'd maybe even double the contrast medium ratio that I use there. So I'm gonna, I'll complete this section, do another. Mistakes happen all the time, don't worry about it. If something that you think should have gone one way goes completely another way, there's often a very good reason. And the reason here is because I'm not painting deep red, I'm not doing a Bludge Angel, I'm not doing a Bloodthirster, I am doing a very, very light armour. Now we have done that. We should probably jump to a 000 here, I'm still on the 2, but we can re-establish our edges very carefully and very fine. Particularly in the areas of the model where we've put the highlights. First time edge highlighting there without screwing it up. Excellent. I would normally be much closer to my face if I was doing that. I'd recommend you put it right by your nose, those edge highlights. Alright, let's see if we can't get this guy finished off armor-wise at least. He's turned out pretty well. There are a few weaker spots for sure. This bit below the knee in general. But someone turned out really well and he's looking pretty effective. So we've worked out how to not screw up, and we need to be just a little bit more subtle with our contrast. So the ratio you need is way, way, way softer than I expected, and that's because, as we figured out, it's going over a lighter base. So actually this ratio is probably somewhere between 1:4 and 1:6 contrast medium to Skeleton Horde, and Skeleton Horde is already a soft paint. Right, I got 2 areas remaining, 3 areas maybe. Shoulder pad. Need even softer. Going quick, there we go. Okay, so that is probably a 1:8, I would say. Cannot be too subtle with this, it turns out. Put a little bit of water in to help things out. As ever, we perfect things at the very end. When the model is 90% done, oh well. Yeah, that was perfect. Cool. Right, let him dry and then we can fancy him. Now, if you do wish to blackline, I think probably most people would default to Nuln Oil, but on a base this soft, you're going to have to do something a little bit different. So I'll go for 1 Nuln Oil to 1 Seraphim Sepia. People normally use shades for panel lining if you're going to do it lazy and sloppy, which we are. But then what we're going to do is, because it'll just make it easier to have it kind of match the rest of the piece, we're going to use 1 Skeleton Horde. People would wonder why we're not using colour in the middle of brown and sepia. It's because we want it to be as coherent as possible. We still need it dark, hence the Nuln Oil, although it is incredibly weak these days. But yeah, we want it to be able to kind of, if it goes a little bit sloppy, we want it to at least gel with the rest of the piece. And that Skeleton Horde in there will really help with that. So make sure we've not got too much on the brush. Great. Optional, like I said, up to you if you want to do it or not. You could always varnish it and then use an oil wash as well, of course. If you just want to draw attention to his face, selective highlighting is in like just doing the stippling on the shoulders or the face or something like that would be a really good way to get 90% of the effect of this with about 10% of the effort. So just popping some dots in key areas around the face is definitely worth the 1 or 2 minutes that it takes. Might even be less than that. It is extremely efficient. Alright, so we're fairly happy with our guy. How are we going to go about the detailing? I thought on this one I would just give this kind of method a real proof of concept by trying to do as much as possible in the same way. So just like we've done the armor, I'm going to try and do his Aquila, which is in a pretty striking green actually. So having checked out the box art and some other stuff like that, I think warp lightning is probably the best bet. If we need to adjust it, we can. This is quite a strong contrast, so start off with plenty of medium in there and we'll see how it goes. For 1:1, we do want quite a strong colour, even if we're using it super thin, so let's see how this looks on the first coat. This has been washed around with Nuln Oil, by the way, and I've just dry brushed and highlighted it, pre-shading with exactly the same colours that we've already used, so let's see if this works. I think that is the right colour. Maybe we've gone too weak, but that's okay. I can always do the Nuln Oil around the edges again if I need to. Still going to bear in mind our stroke, so if I want it to pull against these wingtips, I've got to end my strokes at them. Right, this can take a few goes, I think. Make sure we don't miss anything. But especially with that Nuln Oil wash around it and in the recesses, we should end up with quite a bit of contrast between the raised areas and the shadows. I think maybe we can be a little braver with the second application. It's quite a strong contrast, so it's actually deleting that black in the recesses a little bit, which wasn't quite what I was going for. But we'll roll with it. We can always put it back in. Okay, colour's right. Just got to do it a couple of times. I'll do a little bit of highlighting. Give highlighting with Scarsonic a go. I'm going to put contrast over it again. The highlight colour on these is a little bit weird on the paint job. I like it, but it's not necessarily what you'd expect. When you get in there close, it's a little bit of like a pastel-y, I guess slightly yellow-green. Copying where our highlights were, we took our reference photo. Just give this a little bit more time, like that, and then we'll pop some contrast over it again. Added a little bit of ivory in. Okay, so highlights are down. We now need to apply a very diluted mix this contrast. I use quite a lot of water. I'm going to use a smaller brush. Super soft. One of the particularly nice things about momentum and building up positive feedback is it only takes a tiny amount to begin, and from that you can grow and grow and grow on that as a foundation. The moment things start going okay and I told myself, go slowly, pay attention, do your best, no pressure. And without that kind of time constraint attached to it, I found it was much more easy for me to kind of enjoy it, and I started building up these little loops of positive feedback. And with those, I was becoming more confident, which is really, really nice. And I also felt slightly more able to experiment. But not only that, in my experimenting, some stuff went like pretty wrong and I just didn't care. and I did my best to fix it and distract people from my slightly pink marine and put some scratches on and stuff. And by the time I'd done those scratches, I was really pleased with how they went, and I wouldn't have actually tried those if it wasn't for my mistake. So I was able to be way more chill about it, just kind of accept what had happened, and I've just found it really, really enjoyable actually. So yeah, those little feedback loops, they're really good, and even if I was only sitting down to paint for like an hour, I was just trying to get the most out of that time I had available without any pressure to rush. Okay, so I was going to use a black, but then I thought I could just use Drakenhof. So it's a shade, it's already soft, it's got black in it, it's got blue in it, which is a really good association for steel. So I'm going to start off by dragging it towards the areas that we want darker. But I think it should be safe to just basically go everywhere. If I dilute it again, we're going over white or ivory at least, so let's learn from our previous mistakes and start softly. Too soft is always better than too strong, of course. It's really easy to miss the trims, which are quite, the edges, which are quite thick, so take your time. We need to cover every single bit, because if we've got any ivory showing through, it's going to be really obvious. The blue should counter the yellow and the ivory pretty much entirely, by the way. Blue's the opposite of yellow, so we can fix that up pretty easily. Okay, so we're looking pretty good after the first one. I need to do the rivets and stuff like that as well, and I've got a knee pad to go in addition. Just the same style. Alright, so with the armour done, we've got our learning points. We've kind of managed to reinforce everything we've got there. And I'm actually going to use the same techniques that we've used on the armour throughout the rest of the mini. So here's Gauntlet. That got a little bit the same treatment, although the masking didn't go very well. I whipped out the airbrush and got punished for being lazy with my masking. You'll be able to spot that as it happens live. I didn't realise, even though I was putting red all over a beige mini. Masked correctly. So 2 videos that I'm going to link at the end of this video, which are kind of relevant to this topic if you've enjoyed it, are me painting the 2 miniatures behind me. So we've got the Great Unclean one where I tried to do very high quality dry brushing, then sent it off to Zamikito for some professional level finishing, which worked out really well, unsurprisingly. He's fantastic. There's also a wonderful Chaos Lord on Demonic Steed, I think the miniature is. We didn't do that in like a super slow time, but I tried to do what Heavy Metal had done in 7 days in 7 hours. So it still wasn't a short paint job. He turned out quite nicely as well, and he's done in metallics, which is obviously very different to this, where there is not a single metallic on the miniature. Anyway, they'll be linked at the end of the video. Give us your best suggestion for a Terminator chapter you would like to see us tackle. I really enjoyed this. You want to see Imperial Fists, Baseballs, Death Company, Blood Angels, super classic, right? Anyway, let us know what Terminator chapter you would like to see the most, so I can do some fantastic highlighting on a crotch Terminatus at some point soon. So let's be brave. Okay, I'll do.